The fragile stability Bobby has built while working manual labor is suddenly struck by a devastating tragedy. Phil Woodward, utterly broken by the prolonged loss of his identity, the phantom burden of paying for a college tuition he can no longer afford, and the suffocating shame of hiding his unemployment from his neighbors, reaches his absolute limit. He steps into his dark garage, closes the doors, and turns on the engine of his car. The quiet space fills with toxic carbon monoxide, silently extinguishing a life that the corporate machine had already chewed up and deemed entirely disposable. Bobby Walker is the definition of the American dream. He strides through the glass and steel skyscraper of GTX Corporation, a massive shipbuilding conglomerate, oozing the effortless confidence of a man who has won at life. He has the sleek Porsche, the sprawling suburban mansion, the beautiful wife, and a six-figure salary as a high-flying sales executive. To Bobby, his position is ironclad. He isn't just an employee, he is a vital organ in a thriving economic beast. The bustling trading floor hums with the electric energy of multi-million-dollar deals, and Bobby stands at the center of it, trading sharp jokes with his colleagues. But corporate loyalty is a fragile illusion. Deep within the executive suites, behind closed doors, a silent axe is falling. Gene McClary, one of the company's founders, watches in disbelief as CEO James Salinger prepares to slice away thousands of jobs to protect Wall Street profit margins. Gene argues fiercely for the workers who built the company, but Salinger's eyes remain fixed entirely on the stock price. The decisions are made in seconds, cold and calculated. Minutes later, Bobby is called into an HR office. The room is sterile, bathed in harsh fluorescent light. A soft-spoken manager hands him a folder and utters the words that shatter his reality. He is being let go. The confidence drains from his face, replaced by a numb, suffocating shock. He walks out with a cardboard box, his life upended in an instant. Bobby sits in a bleak corporate outplacement center, surrounded by dozens of other middle-aged men in sharp suits, all staring blankly at computer screens. The counselors offer patronizing platitudes and resume workshops, treating the displaced executives like children learning to walk. Bobby's pride is deeply wounded. He scoffs at the advice, convinced that a man of his caliber will find a new executive position within days. He refuses to tell his neighbors or his extended family, maintaining the facade of success by leaving the house every morning in his finest suit, only to sit in a cubicle that feels like a waiting room for the damned. At home, the tension begins to seep through the floorboards. His wife, Maggie, gently suggests cutting back on expenses, perhaps canceling the country club membership or selling the Porsche. Bobby snaps. To him, giving up the car or the club isn't just about saving money, it is a public admission of failure. He clings to his luxury lifestyle like a shield against the terrifying reality of his mounting debt. Meanwhile, back at the GTX headquarters, the bloodletting is far from over. Phil Woodward, a veteran executive who worked his way up from the factory floor alongside Gene, watches younger employees scramble to save themselves. The air in the office is thick with paranoia. Phil feels a cold knot tightening in his stomach, realizing that decades of loyalty might mean absolutely nothing to the new corporate order. Days turn into weeks, and weeks bleed into months. Bobby's arrogance vanishes, replaced by a creeping, hollow desperation. The job interviews he managed to secure become increasingly humiliating. Younger human resource managers look at his high previous salary and declare him overqualified, or look past him entirely as if he were a relic of a bygone era. Every polite rejection letter is a heavy blow to his identity. The financial pressure builds like a slow-moving storm. The mortgage payment looms large, and the credit card bills are stacking up on the kitchen counter. Maggie takes a job as a nurse to help keep them afloat, a move that subtly shifts the power dynamic in their marriage and deeply bruises Bobby's traditional ego. Desperate to help, Maggie reaches out to her brother, Jack Mullen, a blue-collar carpentry contractor. Jack is a blunt, practical man who views the corporate world with deep skepticism. He offers Bobby a manual labor job building houses. Bobby laughs it off, insulted by the very idea of swinging a hammer for a living. He is a corporate executive, not a construction worker. But the corporate world has no memory of his past triumphs. At GTX, Gene McClary confronts Salinger once again during a tense board meeting. The stock price is rising, yet Salinger wants more layoffs. Gene points out the human cost, the families destroyed by these spreadsheets. Salinger looks at his oldest friend with cold, detached eyes, signaling that no one is truly safe. The corporate guillotine drops again, and this time, it strikes the very top. Phil Woodward is called into the office. Despite his 30 years of service, despite sacrificing his health and his youth for the company, he is terminated without a second thought. The betrayal cracks something deep inside Phil. He walks out into the cold afternoon air, feeling completely invisible. His identity has been entirely stripped away, leaving behind an empty shell of a man who no longer knows who he is when he wakes up in the morning. Soon after, Gene McClary himself is pushed out. The man who helped build GTX from the ground up is deemed too sentimental, an obstacle to the ruthless efficiency Salinger demands. Gene receives a massive severance package, but the money feels like blood money. He wanders through his enormous, empty mansion, feeling a profound sense of guilt for the thousands of lives his company has derailed. For Bobby, the breaking point arrives on a quiet afternoon. The bank sends a formal notice, and the reality can no longer be hidden from the world. He is forced to sell the Porsche. Watching another man drive his prized possession down the driveway feels like a physical extraction of his dignity. The country club membership is cancelled, and the whispers among among his neighbors become deafening. Bobby stands in his empty garage, stripped of his status symbols, facing complete financial ruin. With the bank threatening foreclosure on their home, Bobby is forced to swallow the last bitter remnants of his pride. He walks onto Jack's dusty, chaotic construction site, wearing borrowed work clothes that feel completely alien to him. The blue-collar crew looks at this displaced suit with open amusement. Jack doesn't give him any special treatment. He assigns Bobby the heaviest, most grueling physical labor, hauling drywall and carrying heavy beams in the freezing cold. The first few days are absolute agony. Bobby's hands blister and bleed. His back aches with a ferocity he has never experienced. He is slow, clumsy, and constantly makes mistakes that draw sharp rebukes from Jack. Bobby feels deeply humiliated, working for a fraction of what he used to make in a single hour, his Ivy League education utterly useless against a piece of raw timber. At the same time, Phil Woodward's life is spiraling into a dark, quiet abyss. He sits in his dark garage, drinking heavily to numb the shame. He hides the truth from his daughter, pretending he can still pay for her expensive college tuition, while secretly watching his life savings evaporate. He attends pathetic networking events where older men exchange hollow business cards, desperately trying to project a confidence they no longer possess. Phil looks around the room and sees his own terrifying future reflected in their desperate, tired eyes. As the weeks on the construction site pass, a subtle, unexpected transformation begins to take place within Bobby. The physical pain starts to fade, replaced by raw, lean muscle. More importantly, his mindset begins to shift. For the first time in his life, Bobby is creating something tangible with his own two hands. At GTX, his work was abstract, numbers on a screen, contracts in a folder. Here, at the end of an exhausting day, he can look at a standing wall and say, "I built that." Jack watches this change with quiet approval. He stops riding Bobby so hard, offering gruff nods of respect instead. The camaraderie among the construction crew, initially hostile, warms into genuine brotherhood. They mock each other, drink cheap beer after work, and look out for one another. Bobby begins to realize that these men possess a resilience and an authenticity that his corporate colleagues never had. He returns home tired, covered in sawdust, but with a clear mind and a budding sense of purpose. Yet, the shadow of his old life still lingers. Gene McClary is trying to find meaning in his forced retirement, embarking on a clandestine affair with Sally Wilcox, the corporate HR manager who carried out many of the firings. Both are racked with a strange combination of guilt and loneliness, trying to find solace in each other while the corporate empire they served continues to thrive on the misery of others. The news of Phil's suicide sends a catastrophic shockwave through the lives of those left behind. For Bobby, who has already swallowed his pride, sold his house, and moved his family into his parents' home, it is a chilling reminder of how close he once stood to that very same emotional abyss. It strips away any lingering romanticism about corporate culture. Phil was sacrificed for a line item on a spreadsheet, forgotten the second his desk was cleared. For Gene McClary, the tragedy is the final, unbearable breaking point. Standing at the funeral of his oldest colleague, looking at the hollow grief of Phil's family, Gene is consumed by a blinding, quiet fury. He realized he sat by and allowed a culture of ruthless corporate greed to flourish. He can no longer remain complicit in a system that discards human beings like trash. Right there, amid the grief, a desperate, defiant plan begins to form in his mind. Driven by the raw grief of Phil's funeral and a burning need for redemption, Gene McClary decides to strike back against the corporate machine. He cannot undo the past, but he can build a different future. Using his massive severance package and remaining stock options, Gene plans to launch a brand new, independent shipbuilding venture. This won't be a cold entity ruled by spreadsheets. It will be a company that prioritizes quality manufacturing and treats its workers with fundamental human dignity. To pull it off, he needs someone hungry, someone who knows the sales landscape but has also stared directly into the abyss of displacement. Gene tracks Bobby down. Finding him completely stripped of his former corporate ego, Gene pitches his defiant vision. He offers Bobby a core executive role to help build this new empire from the ground up. A few months ago, Bobby would have jumped at this offer out of pure desperation or a need to reclaim his elite status symbols. But his time swinging a hammer alongside Jack has fundamentally changed him. He evaluates the opportunity not for the prestige or a bloated corporate title, but for the integrity of the mission itself. Accepting the position, Bobby steps back into the business world, not as the arrogant climber he used to be, but as a man who finally understands the true human cost of doing business. Before stepping back into the corporate arena, Bobby has one final debt of honor to settle. He walks onto the dusty, chaotic construction site to face Jack Mullen. Standing among the raw timber and drywall, Bobby looks his brother-in-law in the eye and offers a deep, uncharacteristic expression of genuine gratitude. He thanks Jack for throwing him a lifeline when he was drowning in his own arrogance. Jack, true to his fiercely independent, blue-collar roots, offers only a stoic, knowing nod and a blunt reminder to do a good job. The bond between them is sealed in mutual respect, a bridge built between two worlds Bobby once thought could never coexist. Bobby joins Gene at their new headquarters, a sprawling, abandoned industrial shipyard. The facility is cold, cavernous, and thick with layers of dust and rust, a radical departure from the pristine, climate-controlled glass towers of GTX. Yet, as Bobby surveys the empty warehouse, he doesn't see corporate decay. He sees a blank canvas. They roll up their sleeves and get to work drafting real logistics, scouting local suppliers, and mapping out a business model designed to last. When it comes time to staff the operation, Bobby and Jean make a conscious, defiant choice. They ignore the young, hyper-efficient resumes on the market. Instead, they actively seek out the older, laid-off veterans of GTX, the skilled workers who were discarded as obsolete but who still harbor a fierce, burning desire to reclaim their purpose. The climax of this journey belongs not to a dramatic boardroom coup, but to a quiet, powerful restoration of human dignity. The morning sun cuts through the high, grimy windows of the newly revitalized shipyard, casting long beams of light across the concrete floor as the newly hired workforce arrives. These are the men and women who were broken and discarded by the corporate machine, individuals who believed their productive years were entirely behind them. They walk into the warehouse with hesitant, uncertain steps, but their posture rapidly transforms into confident strides as they realize this opportunity is real. Bobby stands on the elevated iron catwalk alongside Jean, looking down at the bustling hive of activity below. He wears a simple, unpretentious suit, but his presence is entirely different from the superficial salesman we met at the beginning of the story. His confidence is no longer manufactured by a luxury sports car, an elite country club membership, or a hollow corporate title. Instead, it is anchored deeply in the resilience he discovered within himself and the community he is actively helping to rebuild. Looking down at the floor, Bobby sees familiar faces, experienced workers who finally have a purpose, a steady paycheck, and their self-respect restored. The heavy manufacturing machinery roars to life, an industrial symphony signaling a defiant new beginning. The story concludes not with a promise of effortless wealth, but with a profound sense of hope and survival. Bobby turns away from the catwalk and walks toward his desk, ready to work as a true company man.